oversee them across the state. I am more than full time. Well, you get salary, you get comp time, you get too much comp time, then you get so there's that. I know now. She has been for a while, yeah.
All right.
If everyone would stand, we'll call this city council meeting to order. At this time, we will have a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll ask that Councilman Hampton, if he will lead us into the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all and welcome to the Georgetown City Council meeting for Monday, March the 10th, 2025. And that we're glad you all are here and that to bring business before this council. We're going to ask you to always remember that a professional decorum is expected out of each of us while we're here. And so we'll keep that and we'll follow the agenda as recorded. At this time, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Brent?
Here.
Mr. Chris?
Here.
Mrs. Hamburg?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. Minke?
Present.
Mrs. Lesby Mitchell?
Here.
Mrs. Tingle Sames? Mr. Stone?
Here.
Thank you. At this time, item number 3, I will need a motion to approve the minutes. Minutes. Motion's made by Ms. Hambrick, second made by Mr. Minke. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of approval of the minutes for February 24th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Let the record reflect that it passed. Item 4, the receipt of the check registry. You should have got that. If you have received that, please raise your hand. Thank you. Let the record reflect that all has received. Item number 5, public comments.
Mayor, if I could, before we get into public comments, real quick, 2 things. One, I'd like to make a motion to amend a motion that the council adopted on February 24th to postpone the Finley 5K event application, and would like to make that motion to approve their date of August the 2nd.
All right, so a motion has been made.
Second.
Second, made by Ms. Mitchell. Are there further questions and or comments? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, see likewise. Let the record reflect that that amendment has passed.
Mayor, if I could, one other thing real quick, and that is in dealing with the, to amend the motion that council adopted on February the 10th, postponing the Southern Nights Cruise-In application, and the only one that I'm looking to approve is the April 19th date. We postponed both of those due to the fact of the special events ordinance that's coming up later in the event, so I want to go ahead and give them that event as well.
Okay, motion has been made. Do I have a second? Second made by Ms. Mitchell. Are there further questions and a comment? Mr. Sam, excuse me, Mr. Minke. Thank you, sorry.
Just a point of clarification. So the approval of the car show in what location?
The location they asked for.
Please read.
On Main Street.
on Main Street?
Okay.
And it was their only date that was requested.
So I think part of the discussion, I think, that we've had is for things that were more appropriate to be possibly at the pavilion, to be able to help facilitate, having events and not blocking Main Street, to be able to do that. And I know that we have some events already planned to utilize the pavilion based on Kitty's proposals at that same meeting. So I would prefer that we have that location adjusted to stay in concert with what we've been talking about.
So are you asking them to amend that motion?
We can amend I'll amend that motion to say that we look at giving them, look at pushing them, or not pushing, but making the pavilion downtown in the back parking lot.
Yeah, to coordinate with Lori. in that
Coordinate it with
process.
Lori.
Yeah.
Yes,
So if I understand this, you are making an amendment to your motion to actually have them have an opportunity to talk with Lori to go to the
Yes.
pavilion, which is downtown behind the
yes.
City Hall. So you all have heard the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll make a second, but with a caveat.
Okay.
If that date is taken that they've asked for, I would like to approve the date.
Okay.
It's a month away, and we've put them off, they've come twice.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to approve the date, and if they can't, if the pavilion doesn't work out, for some reason, if there's another event, or it doesn't work out, there might be the farmer's market that day, although it's in the afternoon, so
Right.
maybe not. I will second it with that caveat.
Okay. So, all right. Yep. So you need to remake that motion. So you're making another amendment to your motion?
Yeah, I know. Give me a second, I'm working on it here.
So, maybe,
Amend the motion, or I make a motion to amend the motion that the council adopted at the February 10th meeting to postpone the car show cruise-in event application, so it would read that they would be allowed to discuss the pavilion in the back parking lot with Lori Saunders, and if that date is taken, then we would give them the opportunity to have it on Main Street, but the pavilion would be first, so.
okay, so making the pavilion the
Mud,
first choice, and as a backup, the downtown will be the option as long
Right.
as they follow the procedures, and that will be in place.
Correct.
Second.
All right? All right, okay, so we have a motion and a second, and you have other questions?
I have a further clarification.
Yes.
So I don't recall, given there's been a time gap here, what were the times that they requested to close down Main Street, if in fact that was the case?
Starting at, closing down Main Street would start at 5.
Okay. So it was
It's like
supporting
6 to 9.
the good work that Tammy, you and Willow had already done. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, now we got that cleared up, so,
Yeah.
are there any further questions and or comments?
No.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, signify by, I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
I don't
Rose
think it's
set up
fine.
time at 3 o'clock.
Setup time was 3.
It's set up at 3, operating from, set up at 3, proposed dismantle time at 7, the event would start at 4. That's what was on the application.
Okay, so now, all right, so now we know, got new information now, so we need to further discuss more.
Let's take 3. The motion that the council adopted on February 10th to give them the April 19th date to use the pavilion as discussed with Lori Saunders. If that is not available, they could move to Main Street, but their setup would be no earlier than 5 PM. Anything else?
Okay. So now the motion is as follows, to amend the motion here that they will be allowed to, with talking with Lori Saunders, that they will go to the pavilion. And if that date does not work out with them, they can come back and have it on that particular date at downtown, and the event time for closing the city street and State Road will be at 5 PM.
No
As
earlier.
long as they, no earlier than 5 PM, as long as they follow the procedures that they need to do. Now, do I have a second on that one?
Yes, you do.
All right, second made by Ms. Mitchell. Now, are there further questions and/or comments? All right. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. All right. Now, once again, let's talk now about public comments. As a reminder, with public comments, you will have 4 minutes. We ask that you come to this podium. Please take your time and mention your name, because this is being recorded, so we'll know who we're dealing with. I'm going to try, I know that some of you here about different ordinances that are about the same thing, so I'm going to try to keep it all in one section. So if we're talking about chickens, I'm going to try to keep all the chickens together, and if we're talking about something else, we'll keep those in the same way, all right? So, again, at 4 minutes, Madam Clerk here will time you. At 3-minute mark, she will alert you that you have 1 minute. At the end of 1 minute, she will let you know that your time is up. And we ask that you please be respectful, and then and for everybody who wants to speak, and take your seat. All right? All right, let's see here. Kitty Dogood, I'll let you go first. You want to talk about the events ordinance?
I will. Thank you. I'm Kitty Dogood, and I'm going to read my statement because we all know I can get lost sometimes, so I have it written down that I will read to you this evening regarding events on Main Street and downtown. So thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I would like to address the recent information that I read in the paper regarding downtown events and the costs associated to the city. I have worked in downtown revitalization for nearly 20 years, 6 of which were focused specifically in our downtown, with additional experience around the state. Community engagement events not only contribute to the vitality of a community, but also have a positive economic impact on locally owned businesses. These events help transform downtown into a space for people rather than simply serving as a corridor for vehicular traffic. Participants in 5K races or other events will discover a local shop they haven't noticed before and will likely return to enjoy shopping and/or dining. During my time here, we developed a map for 5K races, created a simple application, and sought council approval. I also submitted the necessary encroachment permit to the state. Most of these events occur before stores open and after closing hours, minimizing disruption. It's important to recognize the positive impact these activities have on our community. For events such as cruise-in or music performances, scheduling them after 5 p.m. allows shop owners to complete their workday. Mrs. Sames, who's not here, would recall that all members of the car community were not fond of my decisions at the time, but keeping those streets open until 5 p.m. was essential for business. It doesn't take long to park cars on a street, and the benefit to downtown is undeniable. Mrs. Sames was also the mayor when Georgetown Main Street introduced Thursdays on the Square, which contributed to the vibrancy we now enjoy in our downtown. There are simple, effective solutions to challenges if they arise. These types of events have been driving traffic to downtown businesses for decades. After conducting my own research here in town, I believe the primary issue may be communication. However, I do not believe that is the case for larger events such as the festival, as Lori and her team do an excellent job ensuring all Main Street residents are notified. A community calendar could be a valuable tool to improve communication further. While the reported $100,000 may seem significant, it's also important to view the additional staffing costs as an investment in the heart of our community, which is what makes our downtown such a special place. The investment translates roughly to about $2.50 per person in the city. Many of these events are fundraisers for local organizations, and the requirement to cover city services can detract from their core missions. At an Amen a House event last fall, several attendees commented to me on how much they appreciated the support provided by city workers and the police, which helps the events run smoothly. We all want to preserve the small-town charm that makes our community so special. As a Main Street resident, I deeply appreciate the downtown events that enhance the quality of life in our area. These events are an integral part of what makes living downtown so unique. We know that downtown living and working are much different than outside of a downtown. This is one simple goal: helping the community make people feel welcome and feel good. When you do that, success will always follow. Please know that I'm always happy to assist you however I can, and I'm also in favor of having chickens. Oh, and I left you some documentation, and one is yellow, so you'll be easily found later on.
Thank you, Ms. Duguid. Next, I have Mr. Dan Holman. We're going to talk about depreciation.
I'm Dan Holman from Georgetown. First of all, I wanted to thank the city. There was this, just for clearing up the issue about the Housing Needs Assessment Committee, and just to speak real quickly about the Housing Needs Assessment project. It's been going on for about a year now, so it's kind of time to get it wrapped up and discussed, fully at the council, and get some initiatives in order. I think their final thing that they have yet to present, they gave you some information before, was the some strategy moving forward. So they have some strategy points, and it's time. Building in Georgetown is picking up now that wastewater treatment plan is done and the comprehensive plan is done, and we're kind of missing some opportunities to get this affordable housing strategy into this new building activity. So, and then regarding the committee, thank you the city for clearing up just about transparency in the city. That's important. So I wanted to talk about tonight. We're having this stormwater presentation about. There's all this unfunded stormwater infrastructure around Georgetown that we all know about, but it's just expensive and it's hard. This is something that needs a strategy, and it's kind of a complicated strategy. It's an engineering strategy and a financial strategy and a policy strategy. So we all know that we have, I think he can give the numbers again tonight, but numbers from before, I think, were like $80 million of infrastructure that's not really being, just deteriorating every year. Things depreciate or crumble, and it's just not, we're not saving money or putting money aside to fix it. I believe, so some numbers just to pay attention tonight are, what's needed to fix this. And I think there's a number of $2.6 million a year, and clarify that we need to put into it that we're not currently putting into it. So one question is, we're already putting about $1 million a year into stormwater. Does that mean we're only 1.6 short, or is that 2.6 in addition to the 1? So either way, that's not like a huge number. And I know that stormwater is not really that exciting of an issue, not as exciting as chickens, that's definitely I support that discussion for sure. But this stormwater is not really highly exciting, but it's a basic function of the city that it's just the job of the city to do this. This has to be done, whether it's, everybody is excited about it or not. So I think this council is very well prepared to have this discussion. This kind of started from the previous council and previous mayor and has been moving forward. And like Kim Minke, like you're an engineering and finance, and Tammy was an important part of starting this out years ago, or a few years ago. And you're on the finance committee. So one question for the finance committee to ask this year is the fiscal court really needs to kick in to stormwater in our city. The way taxes work in Georgetown is different than other counties in the state. The city and the county take all the same number of taxes. And this is county stormwater too, like the Georgetown is in the county. So they really need, you need to ask them. So hopefully you might ask them officially, could you put some money into this? And they already are for like the MS4 programs, but they really need to step up and fund this. This is not just the city that needs to solve this problem. The county needs to partner with you all as well. Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Terry Thomas, going to talk about the Boston Park.
Hello to the council. Once again, here we are talking about this special place called Boston. It's a really, really special community. And y'all know a little bit about it, but we still trying to find our identity. I say that we've done everything that was asked to get this park changed. We done everything that they asked, and every time we done something, it was always more. We down to this. We down to y'all. We just need y'all to understand that this place need identity. April the 15th of this year, when it comes, I know it's not 250 years old, but this place called Boston, it was formed for ex-black slaves. It'll be 153 years old, and it has nothing to tell about its identity, who it is, where it is. If you riding through it, you would think it was Ed Davis. It's not Ed Davis. Ed Davis is in Boston. We need Boston and the park. That's the place that brings us all together. It's been that way for years, and it still probably ain't gonna change. But we want it to be Boston Park all by itself, with no other names attached. And I just pray, even if you don't, I thank you ahead of time just for listening to us. This place means a lot to a lot of people. And I just wish that that park could have its own name, Boston Park. There you go.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Darnell Christopher, who wants to talk about Boston Park.
My name's Darnell Christopher. I'd like to give thanks for being able to be allowed to be able to present to you, the mayor, city council, citizens of Georgetown. I'm not no historian, but I'd like to give you a little history of the Boston. And as Terry said, it means so much to us. It's not a bad place. There have been great people who have came out of Boston. There have been great people coming and gone. They was great people, so it's not bad and it's not to be ashamed of. I just want to say the park is a staple in our community that binds us together as we walk through different parts of the world. We can always come back home to Boston and Boston Park. By changing the name is like wiping out our history. People over in there, Boston, just want to restore the name back to what it was, not to change that Davis Latham Center. To me, there's no identity crisis. I mean, if somebody took a sign up and put a sign down and said, we're going to call it Ed Davis, nobody knows who put it there, why they put it there, but it was a pretty smooth move, whoever did it. So it's like wiping out our history. So, you know, Ed Davis has been there 30 years. The building's probably been there 14. We have a history of our community being 158 years, 153 by recording by John G. Morrison. He the one that first officially called it Boston, 1872, living over on Hampton Street. Bought all the land back over in Boston, and he transceded the land to his slaves. He wasn't trying to make business or make money. He was giving it away, and he was on love offerings, and I got little information and stuff that I could give you that you could read for yourself. And he's prominent for that name to be Boston. He's the one that you really have to look up. But there was other good people too at that time. Goodloe, Nathan Goodloe, and a couple other good people that was anti-slavery. They didn't agree with slavery, but they was a small majority, but they had a lot of weight. So You know, we just want our history to be remembered. So, how long that sign's been up there, I don't even know, 7, 8 years, maybe 10 at the most or something. I don't know how it even, got up there for real. But it seemed like to me it's all when that concrete came around for the parking at the back of the park is when that sign came through there. So, just to thank our ancestors paved the way for us today. Our greatest granddaddies and grandmothers and uncles and aunts, the things they endured to make things better for us, the prayers, the teachings, the ways of the world, and the whoopings that came along with it. We had to go get our own switches. Better not get no little one up either. They whooped us, and if we cried, we got more. Something did, and no one told, everybody get whooped or snitched. That's great grandmothers. This is saying these people is 1898 and 1902. The sternness that they had that still strives in our lives today. They wasn't old enough. They was, when Ed Davis was built, they 30 years old. They never got to go to Ed Davis. They count too, because their sternness means everything to me. And I love my great-grandmothers and grandfathers, and I can see the past that they left for us to pick up. They made their history. It's our time for us to make our history. This is a new day and a new time. Everybody got dreams. Everybody's riding the bus. It's time for us to make history. So, and I'm just saying that Boston has 158 unrecorded because it took 5 years for it to be recorded through Johnson. His first deed was Hickman Street, and he lived right there. So that little road called Hampton came through in 1898, and it was a dirt road, and it came to Northampton, but it was this trail, and the trail was going from this side of Northampton all the way to the Boston Square was his property, and it was plantation, so just take the history in consideration, and that, that it takes us all the way back to the Civil War when the courthouses burned. We just scratching the surface on this Boston thing. It's bigger than us. We just scratching the surface on it. We need to dig into it and go back, because after all, we got the horse, we got the Revolutionary War, we got Boston. We got to scratch the surface and dig and see where this thing really goes. But we're gonna go on record for 153 years, and I just like to thank y'all for your time, for your consideration, and that when there was 2 or 3 always in time, there was good people. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, I think there was an addition. Is it Tabitha Parker? Is she here? Excuse me. Is it Parker or Baker?
Sorry?
Your name is?
Tabitha Parker.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you for letting me speak with you all today. I'm speaking on behalf of an event organizer. Their business name is All Your Events by Rena. We are wanting to host a small vendors market May 3rd. We are asking if we can have a section of Main Street. If not, we are open to suggestions. I understand the pavilion is an option, but I'm just here today to try and ask for permission for us to host this event here in Scott County.
Have you went through the form or anything with the clerk on actually applying for do that? Are you talking about closing downtown roads or anything of that nature?
We were considering closing down a section of Main Street, but we are willing to be adjustable in our location. We have filled out an application. We have been speaking with County Clerk's office to understand more.
Okay, so the way the process works is you need to go to our city clerk, which is Ms. Hoffman right here.
I spoke to someone with your group. I don't have an application yet.
Right.
We were awaiting to see if our insurance would be enough. On documentation, it says that we need to have a minimum of, I think it was 20,000. A million. we are just asking if our insurance is enough to cover it, or if we need to
And
negotiate
Mayor,
things.
one thing, one suggestion is if you contact Parks and Recreation, use of the county park, it's a smaller cost, and you can rent the enclosed building and the open air building as well, and even the concession stand that would give you an event, whether it's rain or shine, so maybe an option to look at.
I appreciate your input, thank you.
And I would suggest that if you still desire to want to use the downtown, you go, please follow the procedure of going through with our city clerk, and because she's the coordinator for all that, so. And when you get that all worked out, and get back with her, we can maybe look at this and revisit that later, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, now, the next three, let's go and talk about some chickens. So, next, coming up on here, we'll talk about chicken ordinance, is gonna be Lindsay Trent.
Hello, that's me. I'm Lindsay Trent. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Okay.
I am asking for the current ordinance be amended to allow for chickens within city limits. I'm a passionate person about nature and the invaluable lessons that it provides. I believe that this change would greatly benefit the families and residents of Georgetown, as well as bringing the community together in a time of division, while also promoting self-sufficiency. All of our surrounding cities have been successful in implementing policies to ensure public health and neighborhood harmony. So I've brought copies of Fayette County's ordinance, as well as like a general summary of all of our neighboring cities. I also brought a little list of myths and facts about keeping backyard chickens, that hopefully that'll be helpful as well. And just one copy of the 568 signatures so far, as well as some comments. So first I'll go over a few of the many benefits of having backyard chickens. So environmentally speaking, chickens produce natural fertilizer. They help control pests and weeds without chemicals, and they eat food scraps that would otherwise go into the landfills. They promote self-sufficiency and food security for everyone. So families would have access to their own fresher and healthier eggs, as well as reducing their grocery bills, which we know are outlandish these days. Families, especially children, would be able to learn responsibility and sustainability. Chickens offer a hands-on opportunity to learn the connection between food sources and the environment. And I believe it's so important for children to know that food comes from plants and animals and not just the grocery store. Being able to be blessed and be able to grow our own food is just an amazing thing. Backyard chickens also can help foster relationships within the neighborhood, maybe getting back to that feeling of borrowing a cup of sugar from a neighbor, or maybe an egg or two. So let's talk about some of the concerns. Avian influenza, bird flu, obviously that's a concern. It's been around for 30 years, it's been closely monitored, and thankfully it's never become an outbreak within humans. Backyard flocks are at a lower risk because they're smaller and well managed in comparison to large commercial farms where diseases can easily spread due to their high density conditions. Of course, there's risks with any pet ownership, but being responsible and aware will really help mitigate these concerns. With proper care and sanitation practices, the risks are greatly reduced. And some of those practices are keeping chickens contained where wild birds can't access them, proper hand washing, proper hygiene. When handled, there's been some rumors going around. So when handled properly and cooked properly, meat and eggs that are harvested from infected chickens, if we don't know they're infected, as long as they're cooked properly, there's no worries. There's no food safety risk. Thank you. Cases are at a minimum. They're extremely rare with humans. There's been 70 cases since last March in the U.S., only 2 of which were from backyard chickens. Noise and smell, I know, are a concern. Hens are not ordinarily loud. They are no louder than a human conversation. Chickens are clean animals that spend hours maintaining their hygiene. So it's not chickens that smell, it's animal waste that smells, but as you keep your coop maintained, there shouldn't be any odors that come out. Another concern, chickens attract rodents and predators, But chicken keepers care for and want their flock to remain safe, and they want to keep their chicken feed safe as well. So maintaining a clean, predator-safe coop is what's going to really help eliminate this concern. And knowledge is power. The Extension Office has agreed to host poultry care classes to better prepare our community for becoming caring chicken keepers. Thank you. And events on Monday.
Catherine Hager.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Catherine Hager. I'm currently serving as a state board member for Kentucky 4-H, and I'm the club president for Scott County Poultry Club. I stand before you today as a 16-year-old with over a decade experience in the poultry industry. My resume includes High Point National Exhibitor with my flock, as well as owning one of the only few nationally listed heritage flocks by the Livestock Conservancy of Dominique's, the oldest breed of chicken in America. I've also been recognized by our House of Representatives for my I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Representatives for my community service project here in Scott County, known as Incubation Station. This service program is what brought this topic to my attention. For you see, my service project has been implemented in every school here in the county from pre-K through 12th grade, and within it, Scott County students learn embryology, care of chickens, and where their food comes from. Many of the students and their families have wished to take these chicks home from the classrooms, but have been prevented due to our current city ordinance, hence my presence here tonight. We must consider such arguments against an ordinance change, like wandering birds, too many birds, crowing males, and etc. When I stand before you today and request this change, but let's approach this as a solution-driven problem. A new ordinance could, for example, specify a bird limit. Example, 4 layers can provide enough eggs in a week for a family of 4. The sex of a bird, hens only, and that they must remain on property. Consider a broiler project in which people can grow their own chicken in 8 weeks in their backyard. Under the current ordinance, an 8-week project is not even allowed, an 8-week project that could feed a family for a year. When people express their concerns about wandering birds, there are safe methods of wing clipping that keep them from flying, and enclosed coops could also be required. Some cities, Cynthiana for example, require an application be submitted with photos of setup to obtain a permit number. Some I have spoken to have expressed concerns over smell. While chickens can smell when not properly cared for, their excrement is rich in nutrients for personal and community gardens. Historically, land prices have been proposed as being impacted negatively if chickens were allowed within the city. But logically, how could that argument have merit when some of the highest priced land in the county is zoned rural and filled with livestock? An ordinance is not changing the zoning of a house. It is giving the people who vote for each of you and who adore the city an opportunity to enjoy a few feathered creatures. Ultimately, all of these negative impacts can be mitigated with a thoughtfully worded ordinance and an application for permit. Farm fresh eggs are higher in omega-3s, vitamin D, and fewer inflammatory fats. They last longer than the months-old eggs we buy from shelf under the illusion of fresh. It is time we take responsibility and become more educated consumers of our food and food sources. It is time we honor the rich agricultural history of our city, county, and our state that has been long a top poultry producer. In the times of today and with current food prices, I urge you to please consider updating our ordinance to allow our citizens, including youth like me, the autonomy to be self-sufficient with our food sources and own a few feathered friends. Thank you for your time tonight and for allowing me to speak. I look forward to working with each of you and Ms. Trent on this project to benefit everyone in our community.
Thank you. All righty. We have one more, Mr. David Pinkston wants to talk about chickens.
I'm not nearly as prepared as these two ladies. Mine's going to be a lot shorter and a lot simpler. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members and staff. My name is David Pinkston. I reside on Military Street, right up the road here. I am in support of the chicken ordinance. I grew up in Washington County, which is just an hour from here. on a farm my whole life. My family still farms. I do not. I have resided here since 2000. Started working here in 1992, so this is home. But I cannot afford to buy a farm in Scott County, right? So I am that country boy at heart. I always have been. I am now a grandfather of a 4-year-old little boy and a 2-week-old granddaughter. And I want to foster animal care and animal husbandry and love with them and for them and for their generations to follow. And I want to start with chickens. Simple, that's all I want. And I want your support, please. Thank you very much.
All righty. Anything else? All right. Item, mayor's comment. I want to talk a little bit about one item, and I think Mr. Owen brought it up, that come on, Michael. That we had a citizen's complaint for a open meetings violation pertaining to the housing assessment that was done. Once we heard of that, we immediately took action. We immediately investigated, and we found out that we were in violation of that. It was something inadvertently that happened. It was nothing of malice. We were not trying to be not transparent. It was a simple mistake that we made. We have learned from it. And for the record, and we're going to read in the record, Madam Clerk's going to read for the record this apology, and we'll also in the apology state that what are we going to do going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again. Madam Clerk.
On February 25th, 2025, the City of Georgetown, the city, received a written complaint alleging an open meetings violation by the Housing Needs Assessment Advisory Committee, the committee, which met on 2 occasions in 2024, May 28th and December 5th. Upon review, it appears that the city, by and through the committee, may have inadvertently violated the Kentucky Open Meetings Act, KRS 61800, 61850, in creating an advisory group composed of members of the public and other public agencies to solicit local information on the Georgetown-Scott County Housing Needs Assessment. While meant to serve as the consultant sounding board, the committee ultimately played a role in the formation of public policy and the consultant's strategic plan recommendations resulting from the housing needs assessment. Looking back, the city attorney should have been consulted about the formation and status of this advisory committee. We sincerely apologize for this mistake and did not mean to impede public access to these discussions with the consultant. To remedy the alleged violation, the city has advised the committee of its status as a public agency subject to the requirements of the Open Records Act. Any future committee meetings will be open to public and properly noticed in accordance to KRS 61820 or 61823 as appropriate. Material summarizing the committee meetings has been posted on the city's website, www.georgetownky.gov. Click Departments and Affordable Housing and Homeless Prevention to access the department page. In an effort to avoid future inadvertent violations, the city has also scheduled an Open Meetings Act training for its staff. Please note that the city is committed to achieving a higher level of transparency in the formation and implementation of its local housing solutions and policy framework moving forward. On behalf of the Georgetown-Scott County Housing Needs Assessment Advisory Committee.
Thank you. All right. Next, on item B, on 6B, the revised budget preparation schedule, we omitted the June finance meeting. So what we're going to have to do, council, we're going to actually amend that up and get that out to you all. So that was the mistake. So just want to make sure you all knew that, so everybody be on the same page. All right?
Mayor, do we know that date?
16th, yes.
8 a.m.
8 a.m., yes. June 16th, 8 a.m. All righty. Next, we have the council committee reports, and we'll start with fire.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We had a fire committee meeting on Thursday, February 27th at the Fire Department Training Center starting at 3 p.m. And present were the mayor, myself, Councilmember Michael Crisp, Fire Chief Tim Thompson, Assistant Fire Chief Cam Johnson, Fire Administrator Donna Alsop, and Attorney Emily Buttram, and I believe, no, Emily wasn't there, the grant, Karen Leverins was there, Administrator. Basically, the Fire Chief did a great, is he here? Fire Chief here?
He's hiding over
Oh,
behind
okay,
me.
there you are. Did a great job in talking to us again about the need for Fire Station 4. We actually have 5 districts that our fire department covers, but in actuality, we only have 3 stations. So we do have a population need in at least a couple of areas to be able to cover. And what they would like to do is to be able to do the design phase first and get a blueprint for what it might look like, and then if we are able to have a recurring revenue stream, then talk about actually putting shovel to the ground and building it. Where the current EMS building has been done would be the most logical place and the cheapest at this point. It would cost, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, if the mayor allows, I believe it would be about $211,000 to get the permit and the blueprint done. So that's the biggest item that would impact city council legislation. Other than that, general updates, we have some trucks that we need to get back, and we hope that we have June delivery 2025 of a needed truck. Hopefully that's still on schedule. And code enforcement update was pretty simple as well. We are trying to update some things with the code enforcement. We're trying to actually get one more person in the code enforcement office, which would be very helpful. And I believe there'll be somebody that might be in the pipeline very soon, if not already. And they're also working, the code enforcement's working on a vacant property review board, which I think is an important thing for the city to be aware of, so that we might be able to think about housing needs with some of the city vacant properties. Have I left anything out, Mr. Chris? That's it. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to keep my mic off because I'm coughing everywhere, so I promise you I don't have disease. I'm just having a little bit of a cough and a little bit, so please.
I did have one other update that came at the last meeting, but I did want to remind the council that the fire department will be requesting a new vehicle for the fire inspector. So that is something else that would affect our budget.
All right, thank you. Okay, next we have the police.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
So our regular meeting on March 3rd with the police committee, myself, Mayor Jenkins, Councilmember Sames was not present due to health issues, and we excused her due to her recovery. I did follow up and contacted Karen to give her the update of the discussions that we had that day. The others that were there, Chief Allgood and his command staff, Assistant Chief Nash and Captain Lodel, Emily and Karen were both there as well. The topics for our discussion there centered around the surplus vehicles that you have in your packet today, and the surplus of that was approved. We did have a conversation, though, about surplus vehicles and whether, being able to have some flexibility to sell those vehicles back for revenue, but also given the emergency response brotherhood out there and the needs of other communities, much smaller communities than ours, that if there were opportunities for sharing those vehicles that could benefit other communities, that certainly I would be interested in entertain that as an option for that. One of the things that we heard about in a Kentucky League of Cities training early on, a fellow community, the elected officials there came and sought us out and thanked us profusely for sharing of a vehicle, an emergency response vehicle that they rehabbed and were very proud of and shared pictures of. And so being able to share that with folks that didn't have those resources, I think, is very beneficial. So that's certainly open for discussion at an appropriate time. The other item that we talked about was the patrol fleet and the fleet program there. Due to the increased costs that we have heard about in our previous meetings for budget modifications due to maintenance and those kinds of fuel costs and those kinds of things. So we did talk extensively about the fleet program and how we can best optimize that in terms of rotating fleets, maybe to get the best return on investment for those fleets. I did inquire about having a little more conversation, more detailed conversation about the fleet process, having been in the auto business, and some background there to be able to see if there are some opportunities for us to streamline and maybe create some more savings there. The other item that we talked about was having a future presentation and update on the 911 dispatch and their needs and the growing efforts there. And so that's going to be an item for future discussion. The other item that we talked about was the drone and kind of understanding the full kind of long-range plan for that and potential use not only of the police department but other departments, and if there was maybe ways that we ought to be looking at having those licensed pilots that may or may not be police officers, that potentially that could maybe be done through dispatch and a centralized launch versus a mobile launch for whatever the emergency is. So again, some good discussion and maybe future discussion on that activity. So that was the report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Minke. Appreciate that. Next, we have finance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm ready this week. We did have our regular meeting on February 17th, 2025. Let's see, in attendance were Mayor Jenkins, myself, and Councilmember Tammy Lesby Mitchell. Also at the meeting was Councilmember Kim Minke, CAO Devin Golden, Finance Director Stacy Clark, Emily Buttram, the City Attorney, and our Grants Administrator Karen Leverins. See? The motion to approve the minutes from the special meeting held on January 28th was approved unanimously. We moved into the mid-year budget amendment review. Finance Director Clark provided updated numbers through mid-year amendment. It's scheduled. We had the first reading at our last meeting on February 24th. In that, the mayor recommended 2 additional police officers, and other updates included additional sewer utility work at Lanes Run, and which would be funded half by the city and half by the county, with the city using proceeds from prior land sales for its portion of the cost. And myself and Councilmember Lesby Mitchell agreed to sponsor that amendment, and the second reading will be tonight. Finance Director Clark also reviewed updated numbers from the 24 budget deficit in relation to the general fund balance. We anticipate the budget deficit of $8.5 million approximately, and a 30% fund balance reserve required by policy. This leaves approximately $2,025,000 of unreserved fund balance. Moving into the budget process, we discussed the general process and timeline for the 2025-26 budget development, which was in your packet tonight. CAO Golden introduced the idea of departmental presentations at the council meetings preceding the budget presentation to give council full context of departmental operations and needs. I asked that if the Finance Committee could have access to the agency budget applications for review. It was discussed and agreed that the city attorney will draft a policy for agency appropriations that will be shared with the Finance Committee and ultimately require council approval before opening the agency applications process for the 2025-26 budget cycle. Under general discussion, we also, Finance Director Clark provided the detailed overview of the general government professional services budget and the city's long-term debt balances. Meeting was adjourned at 9:04.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hampton. At this time, it's item number 8. It's the stormwater utility fee presentation. I think that our Chief Administrative Officer, I think, sent you all some information a couple of weeks ago on this. This is something that that Stray and them had actually did last in November of 2024. So they're coming back today to kind of talk more about this. So at this time, I'm going to allow them to come up. Eddie?
I was going to introduce to everybody Mike Woolham. Mike is with Strand Associates. They're an engineering firm that the city has used for a number of years for stormwater projects. And we have completed phase 1 of this stormwater utility study, which Mike will present. And then there is a phase 2 that goes along with it that he'll talk a little bit about. So it's Mike Woolham with Strand Associates.
Thank you, Eddie. Mayor, and members of the council, I appreciate you having me here back tonight to be able to kind of review what we had discussed last November and provide an overview of kind of where we've been and where we've come to as far as the stormwater utility feasibility study is concerned. I have about 20 slides here to go over, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions after the presentation, or if you want to talk during it, we can do that as well. It's your all's. I'm here for you, as far as that goes. So as far as the agenda is concerned, kind of you're getting sort of an abbreviated version of what all we've accomplished over, since I guess we started this effort back in, I think it was in 2021 and 2019, 2021, somewhere in that range. It's been a while, but we completed prepared a draft feasibility study through an evaluation to address stormwater needs throughout the community. And so I'm here today to kind of give you that overview so that you can better understand some of the nuances as it relates to finding a sustainable revenue stream to support the stormwater program. So the agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the program requirements, objectives, kind of just an overview of what a stormwater utility is all about. Everything from the definition of a utility to talking about some of the intricacies of how you support it and how you develop different facets, policies, and things like that come into play with it, and then have a conversation about next steps. Next slide, please. So stormwater management needs and requirements are highly varied, and I think what you see here with these images are kind of the good and the bad and the ugly when it comes to stormwater and our natural resources. Water is probably the most valuable asset that we have in our lives. The things that make everything happen. And you look at the stream. You have tourism is a big product of Scott County's revenue that they generate through that kind of activity. People interested in the waterways. the realities are there are also issues that affect that, flooding. You see that. You've seen a lot of that over in more recently in recent years with some of the changes in the climate patterns with these high intense rain events that we've had. You also have issues where you have pollution that can get into the storm drainage system, and that affects the water supply. Georgetown is very unique in that sense because you rely on a groundwater source as your raw water supply, Royal Spring, and it's very unique for a community to have that kind of a system, and Chase and his group have done an excellent job of kind of navigating all the challenges that we have in the water industry. And then lastly, you see over there on the right, that's a picture looking up an aging culvert system. And you think about how old your community is, and you understand that there's a lot of hidden infrastructure down there that's just as old as the community. And as with infrastructure, it ages just like we do, and it has to be rehabilitated and replaced in some cases as it does age. Next slide, please. This slide kind of shows a little bit about the storm sewer infrastructure that you have in the city limits, and you see all the magenta lines. Those all represent storm sewer segments that kind of are located throughout the community. You see a lot of some areas that are undeveloped. Those areas presumably will continue to develop as the city grows, and that infrastructure will continue to propagate in those areas. And when it comes to those assets, there are also regulatory requirements that the city is bound by. I think somewhere around 2010, going back a few years ago, Georgetown, is a Phase 2 stormwater community and came under the jurisdiction of, I guess, the federal government just through their requirements for the Clean Water Act as an MS4 community. And MS4 is an acronym for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, and there are obligations every year where the city has to actually report on the things that you're doing to promote understanding of the sensitivity of the environment when it comes to everything from illicit discharges to public education on storm drains and things of that nature, and that falls under Eddie as a civil engineer, city engineer, to basically oversee that effort. Next slide. So as we think about those kinds of challenges, the city asked us to take a look at, what is the feasibility of implementing a stormwater utility? That's something that has been, there have been a number of these over the years that have been created because there's no formula for how to fund a stormwater program. And if you think about stormwater, you have a utility for sanitary sewer, you have a utility for electricity, the public use it. You have a utility for gas, water, all the different types of services that are necessary to support the city. And stormwater is really no different. It's just one of those things that is sort of hidden in the ground, and it only operates when it rains. And so when you think about these, the formation of a utility, you have to think about things like operation and maintenance, infrastructure replacement, the staffing that it takes to oversee all the things that go into the stormwater program. Think about long-term system planning, the need for capital improvements, and we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly, and then those regulatory requirements that I mentioned. And you kind of see all these things kind of, as we look at a utility, it's kind of bound up in that little graphic there that shows you the things that really revolve around the formation of a utility, the type of entity, financing, the rate structure that you would establish for that, a billing mechanism, and then defining those program needs. And that's one of the things that we've tried to go through on a high level here at this early stage in the process. Next slide. So what is a stormwater utility? The definition is the first paragraph there. It's a utility established for the purpose of managing stormwater and imposing charges for the recovery of costs connected with activities for stormwater management. So it's pretty broad in scale and scope. There's a study that was conducted by Western Kentucky University in 2021 on trying to document the number of utilities that exist throughout the stormwater utilities specifically that exist throughout the country. And back in 2021, there were 1,800 that they had documented of different communities throughout. Those little red dots, it's kind of like a heat map. You see large concentrations where you have clusters of communities and then, you know, kind of scattered all about, but there are probably over 2,000 or even more than that in today's time, just as that growth has occurred. And in all of these, you know, or most of these, the revenue is kind of based on the precedent of a user fee. It's not a tax, it's a user fee, just like there's a user fee for sewer, all the other utilities. You know, you pay for what you use. It's just a little more abstract with stormwater. Next slide. Stormwater utility policy decisions drive the budget and user fee. And so when we think about forming a utility, you have to think in terms of how do you want to structure it? And it starts with the where, you know, the area of service. You know, what are you going to serve? Are you going to serve, you're obviously going to look at, as a city government, it would be, you know, the city limits, maybe, or maybe something different. I mean, I'm sure there's been variations of that. You think about then the extent of service, the what. One of the things that we find is that there's a lot of infrastructure that's on private property that's not in easements. You know, you have a lot of infrastructure that's located in roadways that the city is responsible for. Some of that is responsible by, you know, with the transportation cabinet, they have responsibility for that. So you've got to decide how you want to determine the extent of service. You know, what infrastructure do you want to include as part of your program, and then the level of service. You know, just how often. How often are you going to do things? Whether it's cleaning. You know, there's been a heavy effort, I guess, in the past to do some cleaning of some of the storm sewer systems and televising. And through that process, we found out that there were a lot of places where the storm sewer system, some of it was, you know, discovered damage, but then some of it we found blockages in pipes that were restricting the capacity of the pipe to actually perform the way it was intended to perform, and you know, and that can be a bad thing as well. And all of these collectively, when you define those, it results in establishment of a cost of service. Next slide. So from a national perspective, user fees are based on primarily on an impervious area methodology. And you see there that long blue line, 87% of all the stormwater utilities that you see throughout the country are predicated on that impervious area methodology. The second one was a type called a gross area method. We did look at that one as well. And then when you look at how some of the evaluations were completed for that, about 54% of all those utilities, you know, the impervious areas were utilizing LIDAR-based. LIDAR is kind of it's a high-level, high-accuracy mapping where they shoot imagery of like pavements areas. You can actually pull out the pavement area with a GIS solution to determine how many square feet of impervious area there are on parcels that you can overlay on those same maps. But they use that LIDAR aerial imagery as a basis, and we actually performed an evaluation with that for the city that I'll discuss here momentarily. Next slide. So with the impervious area rate methodology, it is the one that's most commonly used, and with that, because you can define it, you know how much area is within a given parcel. You have the opportunity to have a high degree of technical accuracy in being able to calculate that area, because that area, the impervious area is what generates the runoff. It's the rain hits it, it runs off into the catch basins and into the streams. It's more easily understood by the public, and it does not charge undeveloped parcels. In other words, if you have a green field you wouldn't charge that or assess a user fee for that property because it's undeveloped. It's doing its natural thing by infiltrating stormwater. Next slide. So as we looked at defining, I guess the basis for the stormwater utility for Georgetown, the first thing that we did was determining what a typical impervious area would be for a residential parcel, because we in the utility industry, the stormwater utility industry, they use the term ERU, which is equivalent residential unit. And here in Georgetown, we completed a statistically significant analysis of residential properties in the city and determined that a residential parcel on average had a 3,000 square foot footprint. And that is deemed as one ERU. And so if you think about that, that's how much a residential parcel would have, and that'll make sense when I talk about commercial properties and that sort of thing. Next slide. So for not, and I'll back up and just say the definition of a residential property is a single-family residential unit or a duplex. Once you get past a duplex, that becomes multifamily, and that would typically fall under a commercial category. So those get split apart because a lot of times they've got bigger impervious footprints with parking lots and things of that nature. So for the commercial non-residential example, this is actually a site in Georgetown that we picked, and you can see there it's colored. It shows a 71,603 square foot footprint. And in order to determine the number of ERUs for that footprint, you would divide that area by the 3,000 square feet, and that basically gives you 24 equivalent residential units. So you can begin to see where this is going, that if a single-family residential property paid this amount, this commercial property would pay 24 times what that one single-family residential unit would pay. So that's sort of the basis for this.
Or would you rather wait till the end?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, in looking at commercial properties, I know that some commercial properties they're already taking care to have a runoff area. Mm-hmm. Are any of the places that you study or do studies for, do they offer credits for things like that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because a credit, and I'll talk about that momentarily, but you need a credit policy in order to have a viable utility, because it'll be challenged if you don't. And okay. So then it becomes a question of how you apply the credit policy, from that sense, and we can kind of get into that here in just a moment. I'll show you how that affects things, but okay. In this case, you see here how we basically pulled out all the green space, and so that's the 24 ERUs for the commercial property. Next slide. So the high-level aerial analysis that I mentioned, this is a slide that kind of shows how we used a GIS tool to basically highlight all the impervious area versus the pervious areas within the city limits. And through that analysis, we also overlaid, the city has, they've got GIS, like parcel boundaries for all the different lots, like large lots, small single-family lots and subdivisions. And so we found that there were 11,158 residential parcels. And again, this all has to be done at a higher level of accuracy, but this is the high level evaluation that we did this is a pretty good measure for where things would stand. So we have 11,000 single-family residential units, and then there were 2,075 non-residential parcels. And of those 2,075 non-residential parcels, they represented approximately 76.5 million square feet of impervious surface, which is a lot. And so if you think about that 3,000 square foot ERU value, if you divide that into that 76.5 million, the community has a total of 25,519 ERUs, which breaks down to about 30% residential, 70% non-residential, with adding the 11,158 to the 25,519 for the commercial. So this is another tool to be able to help us understand what kind of revenue could be generated with those ERUs based on applying, a monthly fee or an annual fee to that. So we'll go to the next slide. So as we completed this this effort, we also had a stakeholder workshop, and we had different members from the community. I think Mr. Menke, you were there for that, as I recall. Everything from representatives of the public school system to BCTC to people in the real estate industry to people that had multifamily property, churches, healthcare. We had a wide range of interest areas that were in the meeting, and in that meeting, these bullets here kind of highlight. We had a questionnaire that was completed, and this kind of highlights the responses. Over 50% have noticed stormwater issues in the past. It was something I think the group in general reflected on that it's not like we don't have stormwater problems in Georgetown. There are problems in Georgetown. All respondents felt that maintaining the stormwater system was important. That was a finding. 78% of that group indicated they would be willing to pay a monthly fee for addressing stormwater needs. 89% thought the impervious area rate methodology was the most understandable. And of course, we talked about a couple of different ones in that meeting setting. 56% thought the impervious area rate methodology was the most fair and equitable. And then lastly, there were some general comments that were made about the necessity for education and credits. And again, we'll talk a little bit about the credit policy as that follows. Next slide. So as we kind of continued with this evaluation, we had conversations with Stacy and Eddie on budget, for the stormwater program. What would a typical budget be that we should be evaluating and reviewing in context with this study? And so you see here, I don't know if you can read it or not, but you can see major components of like operations for the stormwater program. Labor costs for staff, equipment costs, for replacement and kind of things that they have to do, utilizing their equipment, contractual services, MS4 permit compliance, and then lastly, at the bottom, there was a line of credit for capital projects, $10 million, 20 years at 6%, and $860,000 debt service component there for that. And so that stormwater program budget, for purposes of our analysis for this feasibility study, that budget was $2.6 million. Next slide. This is, as far as capital projects are concerned, we also attempted to identify major capital projects just based on, that we looked at a lot of the historical calls and complaints that had happened from where flooding had been documented. We picked up on that and came up with a line item budget for this is how we developed the capital project for capital budget for based on these different areas. And I think even today, I know Bourbon Street, I think, has since been completed, so there's been a couple, maybe one or two others on this list, smaller in scale, that may have already been addressed, but this was done, back in 2022. So that was 25, again, that $25.1 million there. Next slide. So when we look at that program budget, we completed the evaluation, and through that, the cost per ERU for that program budget basically resulted to a $5.93 monthly charge for all those ERUs. And then that translates to about $71 annually in order to be able to address that $2.6 million budget with the makeup that we had of the non-residential and residential parcels that we defined through this high-level evaluation. Next slide. So we also compared well, let me back up. This is the credit policy. So from the credit policy standpoint, if you think about it, if you give people, or you give an entity a credit, and there's legitimate cause for credits. I mean, there are entities out there that go to great lengths to do things. They get involved in the community. They sponsor public events for the environment, where they're basically promoting stormwater education. You know, they go the extra mile with some of the BMPs that they put on their property. You know, they may have permeable pavers and things that, you know, they're really promoting infiltration and other kinds of things above and beyond what would typically be required through the city's design regulations. And so if you think about it that way, they're not saying that there shouldn't be credits given, but when you give a credit, you basically you reduce the amount of income that you have coming in on a given year, so you have to make it up some way. So if you think about this, that's what this table does. It shows you if you have 0%, 0% credits, that's the values that we show. But let's say you gave 10% credits, the rates would go, the monthly rate with the ERUs that you have would go from $593 to $664, and the annual amount would go from $7113 to $7964. So that's how the credit policy works. So that's why while you want a credit policy, you want to make sure it really meets the merit and serves the purpose, because if you're trying to meet that same budget, you can't just reduce the program budget. If that's what you really want, that's you have to have the revenue to come in and support it. And so with that, you kind of see those ERU ranges went, from up to 20% went from $6 to $8. Well, actually a little north of $8 on the 20% side. Next slide. So overview of existing stormwater utilities in Kentucky, and this is where we did sort of a benchmarking analysis for other communities. Starting with Murray at the top, you can see this is increasing as you go down the list. You kind of get down, I'm going to say, starting at Sanitation District number 1 is 454, Henderson 5, Vine Grove 5, Ratcliffe 510, Georgetown, what we've come up with in the feasibility study was 593, and then Lexington was 668, and then Louisville Metro was 1247. Just to give you a perspective on what their utility fee is, and then you can kind of see the fee type. All of them were ERU based, which is that impervious area rate method that we use for the city of Georgetown's analysis. Next slide. So, kind of looking at that again, this was a very high level evaluation, and Eddie alluded to phase 2 of the study, and that's kind of where we are today, is that if the city has an interest in moving forward with this funding mechanism, we've identified all the steps that would be required for phase 2 in order to be able to implement a stormwater utility. Everything from going back with a very carefully defined parcel definition for every real estate tract inside the city limits, all the way to these policy statements that would have to be developed, and refined. You think about be a billing policy, you know, defining your area extents and level of service, you know, that would all be a discussion, you know, where we come together and kind of have that dialogue to give you the kind of service that you want that matches the revenue stream that's required to support it. And so with that, I'll certainly be happy to answer any other questions. And this is a lot to digest. You know, when we did this, completed this study initially, there were other presentations that we gave that kind of helped kind of get you to this point, but this is sort of a really high, you know, I basically cut it to 20 slides just so we could get it done in a reasonable amount of time and at least give you what the important pieces of this are from from the financing side of things.
So, looking at this next steps, phase 2, so you're talking about the total time frame, you're talking about probably 20 months. If you go from 1 to step all the way through, you're talking about this to get the first bill out.
That's right.
Would be about 20 months. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Hambrick, you said you had something, question?
Yeah, with future growth in the community, do you anticipate that the ERU costs would remain stable, or how do you adjust for that? Do you still, I mean, over 5 or 10 or 15 years, does that?
Well, you know, you have a bigger system, you have more cost, but you don't have the issues that you have with assets that are in the ground, because it's going to be typically would be new construction, so it might actually help balance things out.
Right.
And again, some of it just depends on you know where you want to go with your budget.
In cities that you've studied, do you ever see that over time, when the water company's been able to mitigate a lot of problems, that these things can be reevaluated and the fee can roll off or become less?
I'm not aware of one in my knowledge that has decreased.
Okay. And one more question.
And some of them say they keep them pretty flat, you know. I'm not trying to say that they all increase automatically, but you know, you kind of look at you've got a lot of old infrastructure that
right.
You know, that's the battle that a lot of communities have. Many communities have, is battling that aging infrastructure issue.
I was trying to, as we move forward and try to involve community perception of doing something like this, I think the education aspect would be important to let them know when you have unmitigated water problems, you have erosion problems, you have insect increase problems, you have foundation of building problems, you have safety issues, road repairs. And so I think it would be important maybe to have some kind of a financial data based on those kinds of things.
And we do, you know, that is one of the major topics in the phase 2 is public outreach, you know, public information and outreach. And, you know, I've been to, you know, we've had meetings where we bring people in and literally can have a computer workstation somewhere and show them their actual property and where it is and you know, kind of what's going on around them, whether they're in a floodplain and, you know, and then talk about the billing aspect of this, how that all works. And, you know, it's.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mickey?
Yes, thank you. Mike, thanks for presenting this again for the new council as well. What's the status of the phase 1 report, and where can I get it?
The feasibility study report? Well, it's, you know, we completed it. It's in draft form, you know, it's ready for, you know, just waiting for final review and approval and adoption, so, but we're ready. I mean, it's.
Okay. So is it available to review?
Pardon me?
Is it available to review?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, we just have to, we've got to present it, you know, I mean, we finalized the document, but we haven't issued it formally with a signature on it, so.
So what needs to be done so that we can set the entire report?
You know, if you want the report, you know, I can get it to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yep, be good.
If you're all ready for it, so.
All right. Mr. Mickey, any other questions?
Yeah, just a minute, Mayor.
So, this may be a dumb question. If we adopt this and we make these repairs and so forth, do homeowners' insurance rates go down?
I'm not sure that the MS4 program would have an effect on that. Now, if there were a floodplain area and you actually implemented a capital project to mitigate a flooding issue, you know, there could be a byproduct of that, you know, that they would get a reduced flood insurance premium requirement, if that circumstance existed. You know, if you think about the MS4 you know, program, it's focused a lot on water quality and just kind of the mechanics of protecting the environment. You know, the capital side of it is an added component because there's a lot of capital needs that if those aren't met, then those could result in bigger costs, because when something fails, it costs a whole lot more to fix a failed system component than if you addressed it proactively, you know, because of the consequences of something like that happening at the most difficult time in the most challenging location.
Okay, Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Mayor. And this question may be more for Chief Bruin back there. If we, working towards this stormwater fee, one thing that I would like to see this council do, and it could very well happen in this budget process that we're working on now, is to add 4 or 5 personnel to Public Works and have Chief Bruin develop a stormwater team that can go on and start working on some of these issues that they have identified, and do a little preventive maintenance, which, you know, with erosion, with the roadways, and that preventive maintenance could help extend that out and not become a situation like Eddie had on Bourbon Street. I know that Bourbon Street was a disaster long before it got there, but it's something that could be helpful in the preventive side of things along the line. So that's something that I would like in before we hit the citizens with a tax. Let's show them that we actually have our skin in the game, that we want to be a part of this, that we're taking a proactive approach to this, not just go, here's the tax, deal with it. You know, I want to see a team put together that's going to go out and work on it. I want to see it ahead of the tax to show that we're serious about this and not just, you know, here it is, you know, take it. So.
Mr. Mankey, you have another question?
Yes, thanks, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So in the feasibility study, how detailed is the analysis of the current condition of the system here in Georgetown?
There was a parallel effort, I guess, it's probably been more than 5 years, maybe 5 years or so going back, to go out and there were some pilot studies done to evaluate different sewer sheds within the city, and there were about 5 or 6 that were actually completed. I don't recall the exact number, but those evaluations, you know, identified a lot of different problems, but we didn't actually incorporate that into this report. You know, those were things that were done and fixed on the fly. You know, this is something that this report really addresses kind of again, it's a high level evaluation, not project specific, other than the identified capital projects, you know, where we understand there are known problems that need to be rectified.
Given the growth that we've experienced over the decades, it's been a long time since I've looked at this, so I'm not sure where we fall in as a MS4 community, what triggers the next level of permitting that we may be subject to, where we would have greater requirements as a result from the
Yeah, I
state
think
or federal?
I think that threshold was like municipalities over 200,000, you know, is the way it was, that was the initial ruling on it. You know, Lexington kind of got pulled into that, and, you know, and honestly, they, you know, the phase two was, it started out at 10,000. And then as population density also plays a factor too. They look at the population density, not just the gross population.
Right.
But I think you're well within the phase two program, not nearing that next tier unless the federal government does something to, you know, change the regulations, the policies.
And then the last question I have is, in the next phase, do you have examples of the similar proposals that you would make to us in terms of the outreach and, you know, the specific education and training types of things?
Yeah, we can certainly provide those. You know, there's, you know, you think about just billing, you know, just the complexity of starting up a billing process. You know, you go through that, and you've got to send out cards to help people understand. I mean, there's a lot of diligence that has to be taken, because you don't want to, if things don't go well on the front end, it's going to be a difficult thing, and you've got to really take measured approach to everything you do. And you know, it starts with those policies, and then having a very transparent process that's open for the public to be a part of.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're defining the problem and what's needed to develop the solutions, so that we capture that cost over time and then develop the system in place to help fund that and not the reverse. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding or misperception that we're backing into a number now versus truly identifying what the real problems are and what it's going to take over time to be able to change them or fix them in an appropriate amount of time.
Yeah, you can start to look at like one obligation that you have in the MS4 program is, you know, like you have to inspect your system, you know, every 5 years. You know, when you think about 80,000 linear feet of storm sewer pipe that the city has, I mean, it's a lot. And it takes time to do that, and you look at, you know, there's a nice map that kind of shows all these different watersheds that, you know, how you can do that progressively, but you have to have funding to be able to do that, you know, to complete that. And so the city has done a good job of, you know, using the resources it has in developing its mapping product and you know, and that sort of thing. But there's more room to go with that. So,
thank you.
And again, you know, this capital budget, you know, it was purely established just as an example. It's not to say that this is you know, this is all the capital projects. You know, there may need to be more, you know, analysis of these different problem areas to see if these projects are as large as they're shown, or if maybe they're smaller than they really are presented here, or, you know, it was just done as a very high level evaluation to provide input so that you all could see what a utility would look like if you had that scenario.
Thank you.
Mr. Crisp?
Yeah. Assuming if the project moves forward, as it appears, you know, in the schematic, if where would be the most troubled areas that you would identify in Georgetown that you would want to tackle first? I know it's kind of off in the future a bit, but would it be something where you would attack sort of the aging infrastructure first and then kind of go out toward the newer areas of the city? Or what is that process like?
Yeah, I think you would make strategic decisions on how to do that, exactly like you're alluding to. You know, obviously, you know, if you're looking at doing you know, cleaning and televising, you want to look in the older areas first. You know, if you know where there may not be data, or there may be commercial properties that aren't prone to complaining, like people are more so are out in the subdivision areas in the suburbs area of the city. You also, you know, some of the funding for this is actually to address the ongoing concern. You know, we talked about the labor and the equipment, the things, you know, that were mentioned about maybe getting Robert and his team out, you know, with additional folks to do work. They would have to have those kind of resources to be able to do more things, you know, to be able to be a facilitator of that, instead of maybe someone that would be overviewing what others would be doing if they needed an immediate repair for something, for example.
Great, okay. And one last question. What's it like from a traffic standpoint when you're doing stormwater utility repair or replacement? Is there much of an impact with, you know, traffic with the public? Is there going to be a really large inconvenience, or is that something that's done pretty quickly and easily?
Well, I think that's something that has to be managed, you know, and honestly, that's one of the things that you would want to coordinate, you know, with roadways, whether it's just operationally, or if you're going to tear up a street, you don't want to go in and surface the street before you have to go in and make a repair. You know, you want to understand what that looks like. You know, so having a good handle on your street systems and both in terms of the the surfacing program, and then also operationally in terms of dealing with traffic. And that's kind of circumstantial on a given project as to what kind of difficulty it would be for the public. But I think as long as you follow the proper protocols, there are ways to do that to try to minimize impacts, because it's important to keep everybody moving and also safe at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Mr. Hampton?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. First question, I guess it's simple yes or no. There are no credits for residential units. Is that what, I think we discussed this back in November.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could. If you wanted to give somebody a credit for a rain barrel, you could do something like that. I don't know how common that is, but again, right. It goes back to, again, the whole revenue stream thing.
That leads me into
you can make it what you want to make it.
Right. That leads me into my next comment and question. Looking on page 17, the credit potential adjustments to percentages. Without residential credits, the minimum would be 593 based on this study. As you give credits to non-residential parcels, the cost per month goes up, and it's pushing that cost down to the residential units. It's costing them more at the expense of non-residential.
It costs the ERU goes up because it's in the
right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is why not give residential the opportunity to do something that would qualify for a credit, such as you mentioned rain barrel. There's other things such as instead of having your gutters run off on the driveway or sidewalks. Some people bury their, bury their downspouts, and they go out into the yard, which is not creating runoff. So why couldn't we have something like that and, give everyone the opportunity to take advantage of these credits?
You certainly could, but again, I just say that as long as your credits, you understand that you're basically taking away from achieving your revenue that you need for your.
But I guess my point
budget.
I'm trying is that with non-residential credits, it's costing the residential units more. So.
Yeah, I think when you look at those kinds of things for the residential properties too, you also want to look at them from the perspective: is it practical, and is it something that can stand the test of time? Because you want something to be in place that will be in place and not just be taken out. For example, like where they disconnect a downspout, for example, that doesn't go into the rock trench because it doesn't work. If that's a problem, and I've seen some of that. I know I don't, where where you've had those kinds of systems that they fail, but they would have to be maintained to function properly. And so then,
Is there such thing as possibly a two-tier system, one for residential and one for non-residential?
Yep, you could do just you could do a flat rate if you wanted to define what that would be.
For residential, and then have a credit system for non-residential?
Yeah, I mean, you can.
Not to overcomplicate things, but.
Yeah. And it kind of depends on what you're trying to do, because, you know, you have to make sure that the structure is defensible from a legal standpoint.
Right.
And basically the litmus test is what are other people doing? You know, have they been able to pass that legal tenet of, you know, of being acceptable, you know, from the standpoint of all the policies that are developed and implemented in the program.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're ready to go to item number 9, and item number 9, just to give you, and I'm gonna bring up Drew from the Parks and Rec Director, and there was a petition, and then some of them came today to talk about the changing of Ed Davis Park to another name change, and there was a petition going around. So what he's going to do is kind of give you a overlay what was asked of him, the process, and what they are as right now. Thank you, Drew.
All right. Thank you. Good evening. Like the mayor said, I was asked to kind of recap the process we've gone through to this point. I guess I want to build on the public comments from Darnell and Terry earlier about this. This has been a process. I'm relatively new to this position. At my first board meeting in July, so it was a good way to start. We had a petition brought to us to change the name of the park. So, you know, welcome to the Parks and Recreation world, right? There's close to 200 names on the petition. And of course, our board at that point was just about ready to act on that, you know, with that kind of backing for a name change to a park. But what we decided to do anyway was have a public forum first. So we did a community forum at Ed Davis Park, and that happened on August 8th. So we had a really good crowd present, probably about 30 to 40 people. Councilman Stone was there. Kidding. We had other members that were in the audience were at the forum, so everybody there had a chance to speak that wanted to. And then we had kind of various options, I guess, for the rename of the park that the public could vote on. So they did that. We left the voting open for a week after that. Actually, it was 8 additional days, closed on August 16th. And then we presented those results at the Parks August board meeting back on August 19th. We kept all the records of who voted for what and how the votes fell out. What we were asked to do next as a Parks Department was to come up with a policy for how to change the name of a park, because I guess unbeknownst to us, it hadn't ever been done before in the history of Georgetown. So awesome, right? Here we are. So we did that. I think you received a copy of that policy. If not, I'm happy to share that with you. But our board approved that policy unanimously in September. It kind of talks about the steps that you would need to go through with different stopping points in the policy if we needed to, you know, say no to the renaming of the park, what would be required, or if it would continue on. So with that policy going through, then at the next month in our October board meeting, our board decided unanimously to recommend that we change the name of Ed Davis Park to Boston Community Park. It's kind of houses the Ed Davis Learning Center, if you're not familiar with the park. So, you know, kind of our idea to help with wayfinding was that there would be a smaller sign kind of underneath the Boston Community Park sign that said home of the Ed Davis Learning Center, just to help you find your way around town. But that was unanimously approved back in October. by my board to change the name, again, from Ed Davis Park to the Boston Community Park. I think what I'd like to reiterate is we listened to the community. I think those of members of the community that this is very important to, and we acted quickly. We've kind of been waiting since October to present to you. Really, the last step in our policy, which hopefully makes sense to you, is it's not my property. So it's our parks are either city or county property, and this is a city park. So we don't have the authority to change the name without your approval. So this will be the last step in that process. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the process that we went through, I would
Mayor?
stand behind.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the name change.
I'd like to second that.
All right, okay, I do have to have, I'm sorry, go ahead. Emily?
I did draft up a resolution based on the public comment and the policy. If you want to, if, based on this motion, if it plays through, we can read this to formalize that, so that it's more formal than just a vote.
Okay.
If that's something you want to do.
All right, so we want to read the resolution, or we had to make a motion first to do that? Do we need to make a
You
motion?
need to vote on the motion.
Okay, so we made a motion to, okay, made by Mr. Stone, second by Ms. Brent. Are there further questions and comments? Okay, at this time, you want to read the resolution?
A resolution of the City of Georgetown changing the name of Ed Davis Park to Boston Community Park. Whereas the park property located at 151 Ed Davis Lane, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324 is currently known as Ed Davis Park and is located in the community of Boston. And whereas a petition was circulated to change the name of said park to recognize the important history and values of the Boston community. And whereas the Georgetown Scott County Parks and Recreation Board reviewed the proposed renaming of Ed Davis Park to Boston Community Park and recommends unanimous support of the same. And whereas the Georgetown City Council desires to accept the recommendation of the Georgetown Scott County Parks and Recreation Board to rename Ed Davis Park to Boston Community Park. Now therefore be it resolved by the City of Georgetown that the park property located at 151 Ed Davis Lane, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, previously known as Ed Davis Park, be and hereby is renamed Boston Community Park. This resolution was approved by the vote of the Georgetown City Council of Georgetown on the 10th day of March 2025.
All right, there any further questions or comments? We'll take a vote here now. All those in favor of the resolution motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that Ed Davis Park now is known as Boston Community Park.
There you go.
Next on the agenda, get my mask here going. All right, next on the agenda, we have item number 10. This was still on there, the discussion for the special events ordinance. This was a council-driven initiative. So at this time, if you wanted to continue to discuss this, at this time, we don't have any sponsors for this event, but unless we have something changes.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to introduce the special events ordinance as included in the meeting packet tonight for first reading. Reason being, we have talked about it and discussed it and discussed it and talked about it. It needs to come to a vote, and if this one doesn't, if it passes, great. If it doesn't pass, that's okay. We can start over and come, go back to the way we were doing it, or we can come up with a new way. But this one needs to come to a vote. It's been a long discussion on this.
So motion has been made. Do I have a second?
I'd like to second it because, we need to start somewhere. Let's start. Hopefully we can vote on this. If it doesn't work, we can always go back and try something else, but I'd like to just second that motion, please.
All right, motion is made, been properly seconded by Ms. Brent. Are there further questions and or comments?
Is this a first reading?
Yes.
Yes.
This one.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
And so, just to be clear, this is not the first reading that we brought, that Willow and I brought as sponsors. What has been amended is that we will charge people, a fee, and if the fee goes over, then we will be charging for police, fire, and public works for special events, regardless of who is having them. That's what's in this. So nonprofits, whatever it costs for the police, the fire, and public works will be charged to the people who are having the events. That's what's in this reading.
Yes, that's what I
Just to
believe.
be clear.
Yes, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
So just another point of clarification. So that would be any special events activity, including anything that would happen at the pavilion?
No, pavilion is completely separate event, or separate.
How is that separate?
This is just dealing with Main Street. Lori handles the pavilion completely separate,
It's a city, county,
joint venture.
joint.
It's interlocal.
But they still have to have,
It goes to Lori. It doesn't come to us. Or Lori?
Oh, wait a minute, so, just a minute, so we get some clarity here. So, Laura, if you would come up. If you would come up, please, and explain, just in a little bit, give me a little content on that, so where you coming from that, thank you.
Yes, so it will come to me first, and I will look at the dates and make sure that those dates are available and they have filled out the paperwork that we need. But we will bring you the paperwork to Tracy, and then you all will approve whatever city services are needed down there. Does that answer
Okay.
your question?
so it is subject to all of this as well.
And you all will also be approving the application too, at some point when I bring it to you all, to you and the judge. You all will both you all will have an opportunity to go through the application and make sure that we've got everything that you all want in it also. And making it clear that just by me saying the date's available and that they're gonna follow our rules and pay our fees, it will always come to you all, to the council and the mayor, because of the fact that they will need assistance with closing down the road and getting vehicles out, and potentially public works for helping with electric or garbage or whatever is needed.
Mayor, could I ask her a question?
Yes, you may ask the question, go ahead. What's happening?
So if it has to go through tourism, what are you setting your fees as? Has that been voted upon?
Only by my commission. My commission has agreed that it should be $250 for nonprofits and $500 for profit. But, like I said, that will have to come between you, the council, and the magistrates and mayor and judge before that is absolutely defined.
So it's
That's
not,
gonna be our recommendation
okay,
from
so
my
it's not
commissioners.
yet, those fees are not yet final.
No, I've done nothing,
Okay.
I have not done the application yet. I've been waiting to see what council was gonna do with this before I started working on our application.
Okay.
Ms. Mitchell?
And your fees go to tourism.
They will go to tourism, however, that money will be used for promotions and marketing of downtown Georgetown.
So there would, if we were charging for police, fire, and public works, it would be your $250 fee or $500 fee, plus anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 or $6,000 that the person having the event would be responsible for, based on some of the numbers that we got last year
Yeah,
that
we
it
have a
costs.
sheet of those here.
$5,000 or $6,000.
Yeah,
The only
but-
one that came up with that was the Festival of the Horse.
No, one of them came,
Just a minute, people. Let's
Yeah.
kind of keep it in line here, okay?
it's,
Devin, you want to give some?
I hear a
Ben?
couple themes, and one of those is, I know that the larger conversation is about how often Main Street's closed, and that kind of precipitated this whole conversation, but the application process through Tracy's office is largely based around reserving city services. And that's another thing that we've confused the narrative over the years, because it is a state road, and so that's why that new language requires them to work through the state encroachment process but the application through Tracy's office is largely related to those city services. So that's the policy, decision on the council's part is, do we want to charge for those city services and recover that cost for the non-civic sponsored events? And so, to Lori's point, like the fee that she's assessing is just for them facilitating the rental of the pavilion and managing that. And then any city services through that application process at the city level, that's the policy call on the council's part, whether it's on Main Street, whether it's on any street, any street in Georgetown that we're providing public works or other city services. Do we want to recover that cost or not? And that's too where, I think this was 2 meetings ago where we talked about one option is a pilot period, knowing that most of these events, the bulk of those expenses that were on that spreadsheet are civic sponsored events. Is it a period where you pay more attention and really capture all those costs and come back with a report to the council? Or is there that strong, and I hear different schools of thought on that policy from the council, but I did want to say, if we could separate it in those 2 buckets of, do we want to recover our costs, or is that a service that we provide, an investment in the community? And then also the question of, the policy on how often we're willing to provide those services to facilitate closures of Main Street that are approved by the state. So I did want to kind of pull those 2 issues to the side a little bit as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one more point that's in here. The first round that Willow and I did had a $75 fee, application fee. We currently don't have a fee at all. We put that in there to try to recover some costs. This second round with the amendment still has the $75 fee in it. And it also has an open-ended amount of money that would have to be paid by nonprofits as well as private events to pay for public works, fire, and police. Just so you're clear, that's what this has in it, that we are having a first reading on. It has both fees in there. And you can say that it's a $250 deposit that once it's finished, we will be adding up how much it costs, and you may get a rebate, but you also may get a bill if it went over the $250 if you're a nonprofit. That's what this says.
Right.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Ms.
If
Amber.
I could read out some of those that we asked, I'm not sure of the exact date of when we got this, and the data was given to us in a public.
January 27th.
January 27th, thank you. So if anybody wants to look it up, they can. But just for instance, the MLK March, total cost to the city was $651. And so they don't collect any money, but they would be assessed that amount minus the $250 they paid up front. For instance, the Horsey 100 would be $2,800 approximately. The fireworks at the county park, $2,038. The Kite Festival, $1,363. Amen House benefit would cost the Amen House, out of what they're trying to do, $2,123. Finley 5K would owe the city $3,158. Total, and there's a lot more on here, total, it looks to me like the city, for these civic sponsored events, was $109,638. And I believe that the city should offer these services so that these philanthropies do not have to eat that cost. But I realize others disagree.
All right. Okay, is there any other? Yes, Mr. Crisp.
Does this reading tonight include the 2 bits of info on it where you can, on Main Street closure events, they're limited to 2 times per month, and then also the second part, an organization can have a max of 2 events per year?
That second one's not there.
Okay.
It's 2 events per month that Willow, on the first round, the first reading, had that. It's still there.
All right.
And so is the language that says
5 o'clock.
after 5 and before 9, for a closure. And both of those say unless the city council approves an exception,
Okay.
in case something did come up.
If I might add, before we move forward and discuss it, just real briefly, it seems like the major issue here isn't necessarily what we're going to charge for Main Street closures, those type of events, and if nonprofits are going to get some sort of financial backlash from it. I think what we'd like, since we are very sympathetic and really love participating with nonprofits, is to offer them other places in Georgetown and Scott County that would have great events that wouldn't necessarily create such of an infrastructure and cost issue for us. A lot of nonprofits, most all of them are wonderful entities and organizations. Their leadership probably does not want to create hardship for the downtown merchants and for us. So that's sort of a two-edged thing here that we're looking at. But I think if we simplify everything and just look at the rule of 2 and 2, in order to get the amount of the total events down that require Main Street closures, we look at 2 events per month maximum with civic related and other organizations, and 2 events per year max from any organization that wants a Main Street closure, and except for civic sponsored tourism events that Lori handles. I think that would help a lot reducing the total amount of those events. And also, it would give a chance for all these nonprofits to go to other places that we can offer them, and it would remove the burden from them of feeling like, hey, we'd like to be here on Main Street, but look at all these problems that we're causing by shutting down and creating all these issues with these businesses. So I think it would make these nonprofits feel pretty good as well.
It's the last thing that I would ever say to the nonprofits who do business on Main Street is that they're a problem. I don't see it that way. I mean, I think that we should covet that's what downtowns are about. That's my opinion. And I would be happy to go on and vote on it if we went back to the original draft that Willow and I came to the council with, and it had all of the, leave it, before 9, after 5, 2 per month. The only thing that was, and it has $75 fee. And then the only thing it doesn't have is charging people for the use of Main Street. Charging citizens who, it's, the nonprofits are part of our community. They've paid taxes. That's the way I look at it. That I don't want a nonprofit thinking, how can I be less of a problem?
Well, the fees with the $75 and the $250 and the $500, I don't think that's much of an issue. Matter of fact, I don't even think, I would be fine personally with $75 fees or even no fees to help the nonprofits. But capping the events at 2 per month and each organization having 2 per year max would just really, really assist these downtown businesses. And a lot of the people that just in general don't want to see that many events downtown. And we have a lot of great events downtown that we all go out and support and enjoy. It's just, there seems to be a large consensus of people that think that maybe we have just a few more too many events, and this would help kind of reduce it. So the $75-$250 isn't a big deal.
The first round that Willow and I did was exactly what you said. Except it did have the $75 fee. It did have those caps in it.
Even the 2 annual each year for?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
The only difference was the starting of charging for the services, for the police, the fire, and the public works.
That I wrote off.
Is that for the civic-sponsored events also?
It says it for any.
But see, it's not for the civic-sponsored.
It says it in here for nonprofits. in this,
But
Not
not
for
the
civic
like the
sponsorship.
festival
I
of
know.
horse. I'm
But
asking.
what I'm-
Okay, hey, all right, hey, okay, let's let's keep some decorum here, okay? You know, let's recognize that each person will be able to talk, and let's do it in a manner, so let's stay in order so everybody can hear what's going on, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, you have a question, go ahead. Thank you.
That was my question. This isn't for, I know Willow had called me up, but, and I had the chart that you have, but I clarified today, I thought, I wanted to make sure I understood that the 250, the 500 was not for this, like, Festival of the Horse, the parades. It doesn't go with that, Martin Luther King and all that.
Please.
That was a civic.
In the audience,
sponsored
please,
event.
thank you.
Is that correct, Mayor?
Okay, all right,
Is that correct?
go ahead.
May I?
Yes, you may, go.
Okay. In here, in section 38, it says, $250 for special events sponsored by a nonprofit organization. The purpose of the deposit is to pay for damages to city property and to pay the cost incurred by the city in the cleanup of the permitted special event and in providing services of the Georgetown Police Department, Georgetown Fire Department, and/or the city's Department of Public Works. And here's what you need to read carefully. Any part of the deposit not withheld by the city will be returned to the permittee within 30 working days after the special event has occurred. Damages or costs incurred exceeding the amount of the deposit shall be billed directly to the permittee for payment within 30 working days of the date of the bill. So and there's not a ceiling on it. You can pay a deposit for $250, but if it costs $1,000, you're gonna get the bill. And it doesn't matter whether you're nonprofit or private. That's what this says.
Okay, Mr. Hampton?
Mayor, could someone please explain the motion on the floor, what that's for? Is that just for the first read, to have a first reading tonight?
That's it.
Is that it?
That's the first reading.
Okay.
But we did have a discussion.
All right.
So, but
Okay.
the motion on the floor is for first reading only. So
First
this
reading
is
only.
Yes, this is discussion.
Well, I'm sorry, Mayor.
This is just discussion. So, you know, we're not really taking action on anything tonight. Just remind you that this is first reading, and what we're doing, reading this, and we're having a lively discussion on this at this point in time, which this was a council-driven initiative, so I'm going to give you a chance to do that. So at this time now, you have another question?
I was just going to make a comment. We have been debating this for 4 months now. Here's an idea. Why don't we just go back to what we originally had, and we start learning to say no if we don't want it on Main Street. We can send it down to the pavilion, we can send it to the park, we can communicate very well, and we can just go from there. That's my 2 cents.
All right.
Will you withdraw your second?
Yes, I will.
All right,
I'll
so,
withdraw my motion if we just scrap it all, throw this out the window, and let's start all over again. Go back to the way it was. Greg Hampton has a great idea.
so, and I may need your help here, Emily, on getting me going the right direction with this. So if we're going to do away with this, so it means we could probably take this off the agenda, so where we're
Very
not
much
talking about
so.
this. So, is that a possibility that we could do that? Okay,
Just discuss.
Thing to
but we can,
take
okay.
off. So if this is the direction that you choose, if you change your mind or if you want to pursue another solution, you would go back to the process we've gone through, where you would pick out the areas that you would like to solve. We would work through the legislative process. We'd work through that discussion, and you'd have a first reading, second reading, and a vote. So right now, there's nothing.
So you have withdrawn your motion, so we have
Yeah,
absolutely
we're-
nothing, so.
we're nothing.
All right, so let's move on now.
Quickly.
Ooh, mercy.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll do with that, man. Okay, so, all right, next, the second reading on the annexation ordinance 1530 Paynes Depot Road, sponsors Todd Stone and Kim Minky. Go ahead and get all choked
All
up.
right. Good evening. Just real quick, I wanted to apologize for any confusion at the last meeting. The intention was to give you all information about the development project and then procedurally talk about the annexation and then the zone change. So apologies for jumping straight into the zone change. We do have counsel for the applicant here tonight if there were questions about that development project. But as you'll see on the agenda, we do have the annexation ordinance first, and then the zoning map amendment, and the planning commission staff, they're also here to talk about either topics. We also have, in this full discussion, we had talked about with this parcel, and if we can pull up the, yes, follow with me while I point. We had talked about the annexation ordinance that we talked about last week was for the lower half of the property. So under this line and down. The second item that you see is for that top left corner of the triangle. We had talked about this at the last meeting. Procedurally, there's language in the annexation ordinances that say they're conditioned on the approval of the zoning map amendment, but more importantly, the zoning map amendment has language that clarifies it cannot and will not go into effect legally until both of these annexation ordinances are completed, because we do need to annex the property before we can change the zoning on it. So I just wanted to clarify those things and apologize for any confusion. We are working with the Planning Commission staff to improve our process, so we don't have hiccups like this moving forward. Do you have any questions on that before we jump? Yes.
Which one of these has the paddocks in it?
It's the one that's in white, it's already got final development plan.
Okay.
We're talking with staff about that.
If we annex that, that nixes that.
Correct. So that's what we're working through with staff. So that's gonna be, that won't come back before you all. That'll either be amendment to the development plan or some other process that we take. There's a condition on all zone change approvals that require it to be in conformity with the zoning ordinance regulations.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
So just a point to the paddock activity. I mean, I totally understand the purpose of all that. Is there any exception activity there for its intended purpose? To be able to get a board of adjustments or those kinds of things?
Yeah, that's what we're gonna be talking to staff about.
Okay.
There is an exception in 620 of your all's ordinances that talks about allowing that ag use under certain circumstances.
Right. Okay. So under that condition, it very well could.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we proceed with the second readings? Okay. We'll start with the annexation ordinance.
An ordinance annexing the City of Georgetown certain real property containing approximately 120.38 acres located at or around Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky. Summary 1. Annexes into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owner. Approximately 120.38 plus or minus acres located at 1530 Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky. Scott County PVA parcel number 141-20-088.000. 2, provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time February 24th, 2025. Publicly read the second time and passed March 10th, 2025.
All right. At this time, I would entertain a motion. Motion made by Mr. Minke, second by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and/or comments? At this time, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hambrick?
Yes.
Mr. Crisp?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilkins-Brent?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mrs. Leslie Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Minke?
Yes.
All right, let the record reflect that it passed 7-0. All right, next item. Okay.
You all didn't have any questions on the zoning map amendment, so I guess you can do the reading.
An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain rural property containing approximately 178.89 plus or minus acres located at or around Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, from A1 to B5 PUD, C1, R-1C PUD, and R-3 PUD. Summary: 1. Rezones approximately 178.89 plus or minus acres located at or around Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, Scott County PVA parcel number 141-20-088.001, and a portion of Scott County PVA parcel number 141-20-088.000 from A1 agricultural to B5 PUD general commercial park, C1 conservation, R1C PUD single family residential, and R3 PUD high density residential. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage and publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324 at www.georgetownky.gov.
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong summary.
It's the 100 and it's got that last sentence in the Do you want me to read the whole thing? An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property containing approximately 178.89 plus or minus acres located at or around Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, from A1 to B5 PUD, C1, R-1C PUD, and R-3 PUD. Summary. 1. Rezones approximately 178.89 plus or minus acres located at or around Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky, Scott County PVA parcel number 141-20-088.001, and a portion of Scott County PVA parcel number 141-20-088.000 from A1 agricultural to B5 PUD general commercial park, C-1 conservation, R-1C PUD single family residential, and R3 PUD high density residential, contingent upon effective only after the passage of publication of ordinances annexing the subject property into city limits. 2. Provides for repeal of inconsistent laws, severability of provisions, and an effective date upon passage of publication. Full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time February 24, 2025. Publicly read the second time March 10th, 2025.
At this time, I would entertain a motion on this motion. Motion made by Mr. Minky. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second made by Mr. Crisp. Are there further questions and/or comments? At this time, we'll have to have a roll call vote.
Mr. Minky?
Yes.
Mrs. Lesby Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilkins Brent?
Yes.
Mr. Crisp?
Yes.
Mrs. Hambrick?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Let the record reflect that the resolution ordinance passed with a vote of 7-0. Item C is...
If we can, Mayor,
Okay.
if we can go ahead and address the first reading on the second annexation, since it's...
Okay, you want to do number 12 then?
If you all don't mind, since
Yeah,
it's related.
okay, so we're gonna just kind of switch on the agenda for a little bit. We're gonna make a change. So we'll go with first reading of the annexation ordinance, Paynes Depot Road. This is the Nettles property, is that correct?
Yes, that's the upper, it's the triangle I was talking about, and again, everything's contingent upon this annexation, so if this doesn't go through, it kind of stops everything, and I understand it seems a little backwards, but just giving you one more opportunity for questions, or if not, we'll proceed with the first reading.
This is for, any questions? At this time, we have first reading.
An ordinance annexing into the City of Georgetown certain real property containing approximately 12.19 plus or minus acres located at or around Paynes Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky. Summary. 1. Annexes into Georgetown city limits by written consent of the property owners in accordance with KRS 81A .412, approximately 12.19 plus or minus acres located at or around Pains Depot Road, Georgetown, Scott County, Kentucky. Scott County PVA parcel number 141-20-088.001. 2, provides for repeal of inconsistent law, severability of provisions, and effective date upon passage of publication. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the city clerk's office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced it the first time and read the first time March 10th, 2020.
Thank you. Next, we have, going back to 11C, the budget amendment ordinance. This is the second reading. Sponsors Greg Hampton and Tammy Leslie Mitchell. So if there's no questions of that, we had went over this, and Stacy came and did a great job of telling you that and some of the reasons behind this and where we're going for this. So unless I would need to have a motion for the budget amendment ordinance. Do I have a motion? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Thank you. Got it a little bit ahead of myself. Thank you. All right, so let's do the reading then. Thank you.
Prior year, an ordinance amending the annual budget ordinance for fiscal year July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025. Summary, general fund. Prior year revenues are increased by $3,312,946.79. Tax and permit revenues are increased by $817,422.94. Franchise fee revenue is increased by $82,023.61. Fines and forfeiture revenue is increased by $669.77. Intergovernmental revenues are increased by $3,650. Other revenues are increased by $505,896.88. General government expenses are increased by $651,460. City council expenses are increased by $1,080. Building inspection expenses are increased by $7,300. Police expenses are increased by $801,867.73. Fire expenses are increased by $1,340,006.30. Public works expenses are increased by $20,000. City engineer expenses are increased by $15,000. Interlocal expenses are reduced by $886,285.54. Transfer to other funds are increased by $1,050,181.50. Capital expenses are increased by $1,722,000. Business Park Fund. Prior year revenues are increased by $83,686.43. Intergovernmental revenues are increased by $93,686.43. Transfer from other funds are increased by $100,000. Capital expenses are increased by $277,372.86. 911 Fund. Prior year revenues are increased by $19,343.05. Intergovernmental revenues are increased by $19,343.05. Dispatch 911 expenses are increased by $38,686.10. Grant Fund. Prior year revenues are increased by $74,654.80. Local grant revenue is increased by $6,000. State grant revenue is increased by $65,000. Federal grant revenue is increased by $2,049,813. Affordable housing expenses are increased by $99,068. City engineer expenses are increased by $3,000. Police expenses are increased by $77,654.80. Fire expenses are increased by $65,000. Capital expenses are increased by $1,950,745. ARPA Fund. Federal grant revenue is decreased by $515,249.18. Stormwater expenses are decreased by $127,459. Community service expenses are decreased by $93,946.69. Interlocal expenses are increased by $196,122.54. Capital expenses are decreased by $489,966.03. Environmental Services Fund. Transfers from other funds are increased by $15,000. Stormwater expenses are increased by $15,000. Cemetery Fund intergovernmental revenue is increased by $10,997.50. Transfers from other funds are increased by $10,997.50. Cemetery expenses are increased by $21,995. Medical self-insurance fund, transfers from other funds are increased by $500,000. Medical plan expenses are increased by $500,000. Capital projects fund, intergovernmental revenue is increased by $2,949.20. Transfers from other funds are increased by $924,184. Capital expenses are increased by $927,133.20. All ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance are hereby repealed. This ordinance shall take effect after its passage and publication according to law. The full text of this ordinance is available for examination in the City Clerk's Office, 629 North Broadway, Georgetown, Kentucky, 40324, or at www.georgetownky.gov. Publicly introduced and read for the first time February 24th, 2025. Publicly read the second time March 10th, 2025.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, I
Motion.
entertain a motion. Motion
Yes.
made by Ms. Mitchell. Do I have a second? Second made by Mr. Hampton. Are there further questions and or comments? At this time, Madam Clerk, a roll call vote.
Mr. Stone.
Yes.
Mrs. Lesby Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Minky.
Yes.
Mrs. Wilkins Brent.
Yes.
Mr. Crisp.
Yes.
Mrs. Hambrick.
Yes.
Mr. Hampton.
Yes.
Let the record reflect the motion pass, vote of 7-0. At this time, item number 13, Chase is going to come up with GMWSS capacity analysis hydraulic modeling task order from Hazen and Sawyer for $25,610.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just the one thing on your agenda tonight, and since it's not kind of related to the typical monthly bills that we do or payables, I'd like to use this time tonight on your agenda, and I'll be as quick as I can, just to hit on something that I feel like is very important for your all's knowledge, especially as we've got new projects coming into the city, come onto the sewer system, the water system. And so this is good knowledge for you all as well as good knowledge for our customers that are here, that are watching. And so topic is related to how infrastructure required for system expansion or new development, how it is funded at Georgetown Municipal. How do we go about this? So very important, and it's going to be in the discussion will be in the vein of our purchase order that we have for you tonight. So just a few quick slides. This won't take but just a few minutes. So we could start with the first slide. Just look at a very basic graphic of as basic as it gets of our sewer system. In your dotted rectangle here, what we want to look at there and consider that is our service area of where we provide sewer service. And again, just basic, but that's very close to and it would parallel the city limits. With the exceptions of we do serve in the Cincinnati Pike Corridor to the north and to the city of Sadieville. To the west, we serve the city of Stamping Ground, and most recently, we expanded down into the US 25 corridor with our South Sewer Extension project. So just think of that again, that is our service area. So within the service area, we have a collection and conveyance system that's made up of pump stations, gravity sewers, force mains. And then that collection conveyance infrastructure that collects all the flow from all of our customers, and it gets it to the treatment plant where we treat that water. And this is again all on the wastewater side. So this is as basic as I can make it as an overview of just our general infrastructure and where we serve. If we go to the next slide. So now we add, and we'll just talk hypothetical here. Developer ABC, they want to do a development that's outside the service area, and so how are we going to extend that infrastructure to allow somebody that's outside of our current infrastructure to tie onto our system? This can also work very similar if it's somebody that's a new development that's inside the service area. But just since we've kind of had this discussion on the agenda tonight, and we're going to see some other ones. This is how I did this kind of hypothetical, but let's just call them ABC Development, and they're going to want to do this project here in Georgetown or Scott County. So lots of things involved: planning, engineering, permitting. We've got easement acquisition, and then the construction of the actual infrastructure. We gotta lay that pipe into the ground. We've got to We've got to build pump stations, we've got to build force mains, we've got to get that water where it can be treated. So, next slide, please. Let's break it down just a little bit more. So starting with the development level, at that development on that specific property, you've got to put in sewer or water infrastructure. And depending on the magnitude of the project, if it's a small project like just a single family house that wants to tie on, all we're talking about there is a sewer service lateral, tie the structure to the sewer main that we own. But if it's a large scale development, similar to what we saw tonight, they're going to have quite a bit of sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure as well, just on their site as far as a sewer collection system to tie in all the new structures, whether it's, if it's a large, it's a 200 home residential development, you're going to tie all those on, you're going to have collector sewers, quite a bit of work on the property. If it's industrial, mixed use, if it's commercial, same thing, you're going to have a lot of complex infrastructure just on the site. Well, then let's move from where I've got the new development noted coming into our service area and it gets it to my pump station. Well, that's called transmission, and we're going to move that water from the new development to the excuse me, transmission mains, and we're going to get it to our pump station. Then that pump station is going to get that water again to our wastewater plant. So what all we have to look at is, first of all, will the on-site infrastructure work? Will the transmission infrastructure work? We've got to get it to a point we can receive that water in our system. It's got to come to a place that there's capacity, and if there's not capacity available, we've got to get it to a place, and then we have to do upgrades to the existing infrastructure. So we have to look at all those components with every single project. We do that at the staff level. We use consultants for that, and our Board of Commissioners takes in all those reports and all that information before they make a decision. So any questions there before I go on? Next slide, please. So we get to the point of how is this work funded? And I want to direct you to answer that question, that very important question, to our written and approved policies. This is the first part. This is a certification for water and sewer service. I sign off on this for every single new project that is going to come and tie onto our system, and I'm reading that highlighted portion directly. Construction of the proposed water distribution and sanitary sewer collection conveyance system shall be at the cost of the developer without reimbursement by Georgetown Municipal. So I'm just pointing out to our customers, our existing customers don't pay for this infrastructure. It is funded by the developer. If it benefits the developer, that's who pays. So if we go to our next slide, going to a different part of our written policy, and I'm paraphrasing here the highlighted portion, but the owner-developer must incorporate all new infrastructure into the respective Georgetown Municipal hydraulic water and sewer models, and that work is performed by Georgetown Municipal staff, or it's performed by a third-party consultant. That's what we're going to be looking at tonight. Next slide, please. And this is just our final piece of this. This is an actual fee schedule of what a developer has to pay, and that's for a minimum fee, or it goes to an hourly fee if it exceeds what hours factor into that minimum. So these are all spelled out. This is what the board uses as its rules, its guidelines. This is what every project that's looking to come tie into our system, this is the rules that governs how we work with them. So if we go to our next slide, or I'm sorry, that was the end. So I'm saying, can we go to our council packet, information you have tonight? And we have a purchase order, as Mayor said, it's $25,610. That's for an engineering hydraulic analysis for a new development on a project that's just north of Georgetown. You have a map from the applicant that shows you where that is and what, at this point, just from a preliminary stage, what that project looks like. And this will provide a planning study and analysis for sewer feasibility, and this will be done by our modeling consultant, Hazen. They'll look at 4 different alternatives on how we could provide service for the project, and they'll provide a planning level cost estimate for each one so the developer can have some idea of what their infrastructure costs are going to be, because when they go to build the infrastructure, they're paying for that as well. So the cost of the study, it will be paid for by us, but we will do that with a reimbursement agreement from the developer where they will pay us back every penny. It's usually on a monthly basis. As we get an invoice from the consultant, we'll pay that, but then we turn it right back around and the developer reimburses us. So this isn't meant to be pro-development or anti-development. This is simply a thing of saying what is fair, who pays for what, and what is, if you're benefiting from this infrastructure, you need to pay your share of it. So that's what we have for you tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Make a motion.
Motion. Second. Okay, motion's made by Ms. Grant, second made by Mr. Minky. Let me get my microphone on here. Okay, so motion's made by Ms. Brent, second made by Mr. Minky. Are there further questions and/or comments? Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment. Chase, thank you so much for this presentation. I think this is a great example of telling the right story in the right way to educate and explain how to connect all the dots of how all this works. So thank you for that. Very good job.
All right. Any other comments? All right, motion's made, properly second. No more comments. All those in favor of the motion to signify that the capacity analysis hydraulic modeling task order from Hazen and Sawyer for $25,610 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that this motion passed. Thank you, sir. At this time, our city engineer, Eddie, if you would come up, and we're going to talk about the resolution assess point for the McClellan Circle Georgetown Commons. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, actually, talking with council earlier for the Georgetown Common Project, they would like to request that we actually push this to the next meeting and bring it back for consideration at that time.
Okay. Okay.
That's okay?
All right.
Okay.
Any objection to that? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we move to the fire department and municipal order for Bluegrass Business Health Contract extension.
Yes, Tim had to leave. He asked me to cover for him. This is for the annual firefighter physicals and physicals for new hires that they do each year. They bid this out a couple of years ago. This is the second and final extension that is available on that contract. I believe they agreed to the same prices that they have been charging, so after this renewal, we will go out to bid next year. And this is for the upcoming fiscal year contract. They wanted to get it approved early because it takes a long time to schedule those appointments and get them all set up after the 1st of July.
At this time, I will entertain a motion.
Motion.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Mitchell, second made by Ms. Hambrick. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of the motion for the fire department for Bluegrass Business Health Contract Extension signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say likewise. Thank you. Next, we have the police department and the municipal order for the surplus vehicles. I think they talked a little bit about this earlier, but Chief, if you would come up.
So these are two vehicles that we have. One's 2015 Charger, as you see, and the other one's a 2016. Both of those have been identified as ones that we need to replace. The mileage, the upkeep, and then the 2016 was almost totaled at one point. It hit a deer, so it's ones that, like I say, we recommend to move on.
All right, I will entertain a motion at this time.
Motion.
Motion made by Ms. Mitchell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second made by Mr. Chris. Are there further questions and/or comments? All those in favor of item 16, the police department municipal order for the surplus vehicles signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say likewise. Let the record reflect that the motion passed. Item 17 is, A is old business. Does anyone have old business they want to bring up? No old business. Next, item B, new business. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Mitchell?
Yes, I would like to volunteer to sponsor the chicken ordinance and get to work on seeing what other cities are doing and bring that back to the council.
So you're gonna get into chickens, is that right?
Yep, I'm going to.
Understand? All right, okay.
I'll agree to be co-sponsor.
Okay, so are we putting that in the form of a motion? Okay, we don't have to? Okay, all right. All right, then, okay, we'll let you all two handle the chickens, and then you all get back with us on what to do about that at a later time. Thank you. Any other new business? Yes, sir.
Regarding the chickens, there's a couple things I'd like everyone to consider as we apparently consider that. First off, if there would be a way to maybe bring in a representative from the health department, maybe bring Crystal in, have her answer any questions or concerns that we might have. So if we could extend an invitation to her for an upcoming council meeting, that'd be great. And then secondly, if we could maybe explore what other communities are doing with regard to how that works with HOAs. For example, most all of us are allowed to have a shed in the backyard or maybe an above-ground swimming pool, and all these, your mailbox can look a certain way. HOAs, it's different. If something's allowed, an HOA will absolutely shoot it down whether it's allowed or not. So let's just take a look at that as we move forward with that. And those are the only two serious comments I have about the chicken issue. We'll save the other ones for after the meeting.
If I may, Mayor.
Yes.
Just to comment on Mr. Chris' comment, any ordinance, I think, should contain at a minimum, it should be permitted, a permit process. Restrictions on the number, subject to health department regulations to address that. No roosters, space between residential structures, and also the ordinance cannot supersede HOA restrictions.
And besides the having Crystal come, which I think is a great idea, the extension office has offered to teach classes, and so we could maybe have them come as well and talk about that.
That's a great idea, too.
And to add to what Tammy just said, Catherine Hager, with her being president of the Scott County 4-H and as well as the Poultry Club and all her accolades that she's earned, I think she needs to be a part of this this program as well, as far as, as far as the education along with the extension office. So.
All righty. Any other comment on this? Okay, so we're gonna let you all handle the chicken end of this, and we're gonna move on to item number 18. Item 18 is council comments, and I'm gonna start this time with Mr. Crisp.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I will share just one of those little comments I was thinking about. If we do move forward with the chicken ordinance, one thing about Georgetown is we do know how to do chicken right, especially with fast food chicken joints. So something as quirky and fun as chickens in your backyard, I'm sure we'll do that just as well. And hopefully it won't make any of the 738 chicken places we have in town nervous that the homeowners are doing that as well. Couldn't resist, sorry.
And it comes with two sides, right? Okay, now, next, Mr. Mickey.
How do you follow that? The only thing I would ask my fellow council members to be thinking about is, given all the discussion we've had on recent ordinances and drafts and all of those things, could we please have a conversation about workshops or work sessions on these kinds of things that are built into a process, so that we're not putting the staff through hoops of drafting and basically setting up the background and the why, the who, what, where, when, and why, and how for each of these things before we get to the point of, okay, now let's make the formal process of an ordinance or a resolution or whatever the case may be, so that we have a path forward and not build it as we're flying it.
So we're gonna try to do the basics first before actually flying the plane. Got it. Next.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing that people have been contacting me about, and I've been concerned about it myself, well, actually two things. The East Main Extension railroad track is so, and I think I've mentioned it to you previously, it is so rough that it will swallow your car. And I'm a little concerned that the way that the weather has eroded the asphalt, that perhaps it could be a problem with the track. And I don't know if, I assume that's a railroad problem.
Yes,
I don't know.
I can ask you that. Eddie and I have been actually in conversation with that. That is a railroad, but yet that they're going to look, we're looking into that. We are doing that at this time to look into that problem and see what can we do to minimize that. We are working on that.
Okay.
Okay?
And thank you, because it's really bad.
It is bad. And
Yeah.
our first, as a
Come on up, please. Thank you.
As Mayor just mentioned, I'm going to be putting together a cost estimate of what it might take.
Okay.
We will have to coordinate with the railroad.
Yeah.
That's a railroad right-of-way over the tracks and everything. And as you know, those delineators got knocked down with the snow
Yeah,
plows
and
over
they
the
got
winter.
repaired. I saw we were working on that.
Yeah, we're repairing it. Are they already repaired? Oh, good.
Somebody was working on them
Okay.
about 10 days ago.
Yeah, I thought we might wait, and I guess the winter's over, so we won't.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, those were put up as a safety measure. People were, the arms were down and people were trying
Yeah.
to
Okay.
beat the trains.
Okay.
And so I'm working on getting a cost estimate together. I'll give it to Mayor Jenkins, and
Okay.
then we'll approach the railroad and see what
Thanks.
can happen.
Well, this is a railroad, my second thing is another railroad issue. Where the, overpass,
460?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
by Arby's.
Yes.
It looks like, the wall is crumbling.
Yeah.
And it's continuing to be a problem when people are walking, and it's getting worse. And I think that they put up a barrier to try to hold part of the wall in.
They
It looks
very
to
well
me
could
like,
have.
is that just newly, I'm not trying to call anybody up here, but I'm just wondering if the railroad also needs to put a sealant of some type or to do some kind of repair, because it's a problem.
It is.
So if we could talk to
Let
them
me-
about that as well.
Yes, and it's either a highway department bridge or a
Okay.
railroad bridge, and that's been unclear, because the records date back to when the railroad was initially built in the 1800s. And,
Yeah, big chunks are coming out of it. I'm a little concerned about it.
yeah.
Oh, I know you do. I know. That's why I'm saying it's an erosion problem.
Yeah, it needs to be rebuilt, really.
Yeah.
It does.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Ms. Brett,
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Mr. Hampton.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I have previously been contacted by residents of Falls Creek that's out here across from the Extension office regarding the entrance and how dark it is at night. And I know that, the subdivision plat called for lights, and they were placed where, where it stated they would, and the developer fulfilled his responsibility with that. But I was wondering if there's any way we could take a look at that and maybe try to help out, because they are concerned about safety and, especially, in the morning, when it's dark and you got school buses and kids and everything, it could be a problem. So just to head off anything like that, if we could just take a look at it maybe, and see what we can do.
We'll take a look at it. Ms. Mitchell.
All done, thanks.
And last but not least, Mr. Stone.
Nothing, sir.
All right. If there's no further business to be brought before this council, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.